Part 6. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 53. Xian Yuan never thought that the enjoyment brought by sound would have such a strong critical effect after being amplified by his strange talent. She was a little reluctant at first, but some things, once they start, there is no room to look back. Under your guidance, Xian Yuan gradually moved towards a world she had never experienced before. Sometimes, you will take her to a strange place, carefully cover her eyes with a blindfold, and let her listen to the sound of wind, rain, and leaves beating through the forest. This kind of absolute sense of sound is geometrically enhanced after losing vision. Her talent allowed her to truly immerse herself in the world of sound. System prompt: you have unlocked the achievement Intracranial GC, achievement point add 1. Another week has passed, and you have begun to try to blindfold her to let her identify the emotions in your voice. This is a kind of overbearing and incomprehensible psychological prediction that is comparable to cold reading and is close to superpowers. She thinks your voice is nice, and her favorability level has increased. She seems to be more and more immersed in the world of your voice, but with the arrival of the Hakuin High School Cultural Festival, she suddenly realized that she was about to graduate, leaving her no time to spend with him too much. On the eve of the cultural festival, she can no longer suppress the fear of leaving you, and she plans to take action. The scene unfolds. Location: rooftop of teaching building. Asaba Kazuma was sitting in the corner, Shianakian was leaning on him lazily, and the sun was shining just right at noon. She turned over and lay directly on Asaba Kazuma's lap. She said helplessly, "Everyone in anime is a lie. I used to look forward to being able to have a happy time in high school for 3 years. As cultural festival. This damn Japanese education is really cruel. Junior students can't spare much time to participate in cultural festivals. Even junior students in many clubs have quit the club and directly handed over the power to the next newcomer. Compared with half a year ago, Shianauman is now less indifferent and more friendly, with more smiles on her face. This is all the result of Qianyu's careful guidance. For some unknown reason, even though the distance between Asaba Kazuma and Shianauman was no different than that of lovers, yet no one between them rashly crossed the threshold and became boyfriend and girlfriend in a substantial sense. Students of Baijin mainly go to higher schools. Asaba Kazuma ruffled her hair. Tomorrow's cultural festival. He brought it up deliberately. Shianakane's eyes lit up and she said, "I can make time in the afternoon." Before he finished speaking, Asahi Kazuma directly intervened. "I don't have time to go. The new work will be broadcast in October. This is about my first pot of gold. I'm sorry." Shianayuan's eyes dimmed instantly. She turned over slightly, put her head into Kinyo Kazuma's abdomen, and breathed gently. The energy is replenished. He felt a slight chill in his abdomen, but his body suddenly warmed up. "You really are not afraid that he will treat her as dinner on the rooftop, right? Young people are too hot-blooded to see this. I don't know if I have liberated her nature, but now the things Shianayuan does are getting more and more outrageous. Well, for example, I like to challenge myself more and more. Asahi Kazuma's evaluation of this is, not worth beating." Asaba Kazuma turned her over without hesitation, took out the silver eye patch and put it on Shianauman, then raised her hand to continue beating. Raising his hand to the warm nephrite, there was a sound of drums and harps, and a burst of slapping made Shianakian scream in anger. However, as the effect of the prop came into effect, the dissatisfied voice gradually became shy and raw. Asayu Kazuma's methods are a bit superb and she can't control them. "No, if you keep going like this, you have to go to the bathroom." Shianauman felt that she couldn't hold it anymore. She actually knew that Asaba Kazuma was very busy, but she still couldn't help but ask. "Forget it if you don't come, who cares?" You quickly saw from Shianauman's actions that she didn't mean what she said. "You suddenly have a bad taste after all," Shianauman is really beautiful. The sense of accomplishment in teasing her is far beyond anyone's imagination. A smile appeared on Kinyo Kazuma's lips and said, "When cats want to act coquettish, they have to turn over and expose their bellies. It takes a lot of extra work to adjust the plan. How are you going to compensate me, senior?" Shianakian's face was stunned for a moment with a bit of grievance and unwillingness, and she said coyly, "No. Really not possible. No, no. Then I'll go to work later." Wait. Although Asahi Kazuma's emotions were well controlled, she could still hear a bit of anticipation and a touch of pleasure. She seemed to be pampering him more and more. Recalling what he had experienced recently, Shianakane secretly spat in his heart. "But considering that many of my little secrets are almost understood, I can even occasionally try operations that can only appear in the notebook." Kinyo Kazuma speaks so nicely, and she quite likes this kind of strong control. After all, who wouldn't be confused if someone whispers something astringent in your ear every day? There was too much emotional feedback, and Asahi Kazuma specifically targeted her weak points and hit her. After repeated beatings, her body gradually became unable to resist. This is why girls know that some Neptunes are really raising fish, but they still fall into the pit without hesitation. The mental feedback is really too strong and I can't bear it. At least that's how Shianayuin felt when facing Asaba Kazuma. If you are really busy at work, you don't need to go out of your way to accompany me. Anyway, I have good grades and have a lot of time at my disposal in school. I'm not as busy as you. Shianauman even had a little Versailles look. Asahi Kazuma was a little surprised. He clearly saw that she wanted to invite her to participate in the cultural festival, but why? Seeing his surprised expression, Shianakane felt even more interesting. The corners of her mouth slightly raised and she said, "But even if I can't come, I can still give him a reward or something." Then, while Qian Yufengjian was stunned, she slowly lifted the hem of her skirt. On the rooftop where there were only two people, a gust of wind blew by, making her legs feel cold, but it still couldn't hide the slightly sickly charm on her face. After the ice and snow melt, spring blooms. I've given you the reward. She let go of her hand and turned around to leave. Kinyo Kazuma was helpless. I really have to work overtime now. And Shianakian in the corridor, after spending the crazy time, returned to reason, and covered her face in pain. What am I doing? The next moment, her nose twitched slightly. This guy smells pretty good. She didn't want her youth to end carelessly, and he was the best gift she had ever encountered in her boring first half of life. In the past 2 days, the original animation team has witnessed with their own eyes what the king of liver explosion is, and the true god has descended on the project team. System prompt: you have unlocked the achievement "A person grows on your liver," and your achievement points add 1. On the last day of the cultural festival, you wandered to school feeling drained by the succubus, earning yourself precious rest time. Just when you were about to call her, a pair of warm hands suddenly hugged her from behind you. The scene unfolds. Asaba Kazuma. Shianakane's voice came from behind. He almost thought he was being attacked and slowed down. "I'm coming." "Well, come hang out with me. We don't have much time in the same school." Shianakane's voice was filled with a hint of melancholy. "Why, you can't bear it?" If you don't want to leave school, or if you don't want to leave me, let's talk about it first. Your answer will determine the quality of today's play. What do you want to hear from me?" Shianakian leaned over and said in his ear, "I can't bear to let you go. I lied to you. You have been bullying me. Why do you want to lie to your girlfriend?" The girl smiled sweetly. Qian Yufengjian suddenly raised her head and said, "Then are you willing to be deceived?" Shianakian was stunned and smiled. "Look at your performance. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love?" Author, Fei Se Hui Xiang. Chapter 54. The cultural festival is one of the most famous events in Japan's student days, and it can even be said that there is no other event. This is almost an indispensable link for literary works based on junior high and high school students. In his previous life, Chien Kazuma had only heard of him but never met him. This time, traveling with Shiinaumen was a good experience. The cultural festival at Hakuen High School is lively. Although the help of a considerable number of third-year students is missing, the energetic first-year and second-year students are not as tortured as the third-year students who are about to take the college entrance examination. The first thing Shiinaumen wanted to participate in was not the small class activities held in the student classrooms, but to go straight to the open stalls. Asaba Kazuma thought she was hungry, but she didn't expect that after Shiinaumen bought Japanese fried noodles in front of the stall, she directly handed them to Asaba Kazuma. "Eat, you don't look good. You must have been working hard these past few days." Chien Yufengjian suddenly realized. She didn't refuse. After taking it directly, she went to buy an apple candy, handed it to her, and then pulled her to sit on the chair. He was indeed hungry, God knows how he spent his nights these days. There was no other way. As a daughter of a well-known family, Shiinaumen even used the eating and sex moves in order to get him to accompany her. "What? Shiina-senpai said you don't have to come and you're busy with work first? If you really believe this, there is no hope. Anyone who can believe what a girl says in that situation must be quite a genius." Ever since, a rather different combination appeared on the bench. The boy immersed himself in destroying the fried noodles. The girl sticks out her tongue and licks the candy apple. It wasn't until Asaba Kazuma finished eating the fried noodles that Shiinaumen asked him if he was full. Asaba Kazuma didn't reply, just picked up the last bite of fried noodles and handed it over, saying, "I want to try it, it tastes good." Shiinaumen glanced at it hesitantly. She was not greedy, but it was a rare occasion for him to feed her. Just because of this, she still wanted to eat. After exploring, there were classmates who were also fishing around. When they found Asaba Kazuma and Shiinaumen, two handsome men and beauties famous in the school, gathering together to eat, they inevitably made a small sound of eating melon. Well, it's well known that Shiinaumen's ears are very sensitive. As soon as she said this, she knew who it was. Sometimes he recognized people by their voices more accurately than by remembering their names directly. He was gifted, and she couldn't envy him. But Shiinaumen was unhappy. With so many outsiders looking at her, how could she continue to have such a thin skin that could easily be broken by a poke? She showed a small tiger tooth and said, "Who wants to eat your saliva?" Tiger-like, as if trying to scare him away. Chien Kazuma didn't say anything, but glanced at the half-bitten apple candy, and suddenly reached over and took a bite, causing her to glance at it unhappily. "Let me eat it?" The cultural festival is one of the rare days when Hakuen High School allows students not to wear school uniforms. Shiinaumen may have expected that Asaba Kazuma would come today, so she specially changed into a small white skirt. The greenness of the school uniform has faded away, and the straight and slender legs exposed under the little white skirt are straight and slender. Her hair is slicked back into a single ponytail, and her skin is like cream, and she seems to be wearing no makeup. Asaba Kazuma reached out and took a bite of the apple candy, which elicited a slightly dissatisfied snort from her. "It won't make you hungry." "But I just want to eat senior's sweets." Asaba Kazuma licked her fingers, and her slender and clean fingertips were a little erotic with this action. It was obvious that Shiinaumen was a girl, but I felt like I was being pushed down by him. Seeing Shiinaumen's helpless look, Asaba Kazuma whispered in his ear, "I don't mind the saliva on the candy apples, or do you want me to buy some food to feed you?" Although Shiinaumen had long known that Asaba Kazuma was shameless, she was still shocked that he could say such a thing. This was quite incompatible with the teachings she had received from a daughter of a famous family. "Go for a walk again," that was all she could say. Sit down for a while, Kinya Kazuma retorted. If you don't say anything, you'll take it as consent. Shianakian was speechless. How could this person see that she agreed? But she did not refuse, and she did not dare to look back at him. It wasn't until she slowly finished eating the apple candy that she was about to stand up, only to realize that her shoulders were a little heavy. It turned out that Asahi Kazuma was leaning comfortably against her, sleeping soundly. When did it happen? Shiana Yuan was a little confused. She prides herself on her excellent hearing, but she didn't feel anything unusual just now. At this moment, she suddenly understood that using Azumar's voice as a sleep aid every day had a bad effect. She turned her head to look at Jianyu Kazuma. In fact, Asahi Kazuma is really good looking, especially when she is sleeping. He does not specifically catch her to bully her, and her face looks a little tired after working overtime in her sleep. She suddenly felt a little distressed. He shouldn't have been allowed to attend the cultural festival. Resting well is the most important thing. But the next moment, she still pushed him, trying to wake him up. Kinya Kazuma slowly stood up and stretched, and then he was shocked to find that it was already a little late. Have I traveled through time and space? You slept for too long. Shianakian was helpless. Yes, this next moment pushed him awake for several hours. Recalling her actions just now, she lowered her head slightly, hid her hot face, and said preemptively. Basically all the stalls have been closed, except for the last bonfire party. In the end, there was still nothing to play. Asahi Kazuma was also a little embarrassed. Wasn't the purpose of catching up on the progress just to accompany her for a walk? As a result, the tactics failed miserably and he actually fell asleep. I can only say that the teenager can survive, but he can really sleep. Wrong. This guy's movements seemed to be shy. Asahi Kazuma knew that there was very little movement after she fell asleep, which meant, Shiana-senpai, you won't keep peeking at me while I'm sleeping, right? Shiana Uman's face gradually turned red, and she was so embarrassed that she wanted to stand up and leave, but was caught by Asahi Kazuma. Unfair. You looked at me for so long and I didn't see anything. It's not fair. I don't believe you didn't take a peek when you put the blindfold on me. Shiana-kane kicked him lightly when his secret was exposed, and he didn't even hesitate to use force. The two stared at each other. Shiana-kane's lips began to tremble. Original, it turns out you really did it before. He was cheeky, he just spread his hands and said with a smile, who told you to look good? Shiana-kane's face turned slightly red. She accepted his compliment and proactively said, are you going to watch the bonfire party later? No, there are too many people. It won't be convenient to tease you if there are too many people. Then let's go to the rooftop. Shiana-kane rarely refuted him. The two of them walked quietly in the increasingly empty teaching building. The cultural festival was coming to an end, and the scene was really depressed. But this is just right. This relaxed the tension between the two of them, and they began to talk more. You still hate the violin that much? It's much better now. Shiana-kane was silent for a moment, then continued, thanks to someone's careful training, my brain has been damaged and I can't go back. Asahi Kazuma knew what she was talking about. Under the sensory amplification ability of the mask prop, she received more and more complex external sounds, which made it impossible for her to analyze them clearly. When the quantitative changes reached a certain level, she gradually became accustomed to a world surrounded by noise. When the two of them stopped, they had already reached the rooftop. Under the dim sky, a bonfire began to light up in the open space in front of the teaching building, and even on the rooftop, dance music could be heard playing on the radio. It's just the two of us here now. Kinha Kazuma looked into her clean eyes and suddenly said, would you like to dance ballroom? Shiana-kane hesitated for a moment, then stretched out her hand. Amidst the faint sound of dance music, the last remaining light of dusk shone on her face, which was quiet and beautiful. Qian Yufeng Jian thought of her unknown side. Who would have thought that a good girl like her would have such a side that completely goes against her personality? But, he thinks this is good, especially since the secret is exclusive to him. He doesn't want anyone to discover her secret. Is it because of exclusivity, or because of other unspeakable things? Asahi Kazuma doesn't know. But he was willing to take action first. Senior Shiina, do you want to date? Shiina Kian suddenly raised his head, with a hint of joy in his eyes, but it soon became complicated again. She said nothing. Because his voice was full of possessiveness and indescribable emotions that scared her. This frightened her a little. Shiina Uman felt a little melancholy, and the dance music had ended at this time. But she still wanted to get closer, and finally made up her mind. She opened her mouth and said, "Kinha Kazuma, let's try." Before he finished speaking, a burst of fireworks suddenly sounded, and what was shattered along with the sound of fireworks was the courage of Shiina Kane. That's all. If you don't have this life, why force it? Asaba Kazuma. Shiina Kane suddenly shouted loudly, as if he had put down something, "You bastard, I am so unlucky to meet you." Ah, she got it? She finally let go of her useless reserve. It doesn't matter if you don't succeed this time. She smiled and said, "Next time, the next time you have a cultural festival when you graduate, I will come back to you. Next time, let me confess to you." She turned around and wanted to run away. But Asahi Kazuma moved faster, grabbed her directly, pressed her against the wall, kissed her unceremoniously, and didn't leave until she almost couldn't breathe normally. "Next time? Do you think you can run away today?" This time in tone, the desire faded away, and an indescribable emotion surged up. Ah, yes, love and desire are intertwined. This is what people are like. Her heart seemed to have fallen to the ground and became solid. "Next time, I'll dance with you at the bonfire party." "So, why next time?" Asahi Kazuma shook his head. He took out his mobile phone and clicked on Mozart Minuet in D major. "Although it's a little late, Ms. Shiina, can you come and dance? It's either next year or now." Her face turned rosy, and finally she broke into tears and smiled. "Let's date, the two of us." This sentence should be spoken by a boy. Asaba Kazuma said softly, "Shiina Yuine, let's date." The girl stretched out her hand, "Yes." In the night, the two danced gracefully. System prompt: you have unlocked the achievement Girlfriends in Pairs. Achievement points add to Street Diary. Reset Diary. Because I was not very satisfied with the previous chapter, I reset it directly. The content has changed a lot. I suggest you read it again. After all, I hope every heroine can have a confession night worth remembering for a lifetime. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 55. At this year's cultural festival, you made an agreement with her to go back to school to dance next year. When you were about to leave school, you saw the awards display stand. Professor Fujiki happened to be among the presenters. You didn't expect that this unlucky guy would also come to the cultural festival. Not long after, Shiina Kane graduated and began life at Tokyo University. On her birthday, you gave her a stack of music scores called The Night of Confession. On that day, she was so emotional that she spent an unforgettable night at your house. She did not give up the violin again. Although the girl practiced the violin less and less, unexpectedly, her skills seemed to have undergone earth-shaking changes. Because there is emotion in her piano sound, it is a note played only for you. After Shiina Yuine was admitted to Tokyo University, you told her not to choose Professor Fujiki's course, because Professor Fujiki had no defense against Dr. Funakoshi, who was most likely the real murderer of Shiina Yuine. Although I don't understand why you said this, she still readily agreed. On the first weekend of your senior year of high school, you go to Shiana's house. The scene unfolds. Have you told your uncle and aunt about your thoughts? Shiana Yuan nodded sheepishly. She also bravely took the first step forward because she had already received enough support from him. At the table, Mr. Shiana had a tense face, while Hyun's mother smiled gently. I'm curious about what kind of boy helped her take that step. Looking at it now, it's pretty good. I passed this level. It's your next task to sort out the matter of the child's father. She winked at Mr. Shiana. Kinya Kazuma looked at him, but he didn't speak. Shiana's mother held her chin and said happily, I heard that my daughter wants to choose the direction of genomics or biological cytology. At last year's cultural festival, Professor Fujiki, as a well-known alumnus, returned to school to give a lecture. If we can enter his sect, we don't have to worry too much. Asahi Kazuma was unable to complain. As far as the preparedness of Professor Fujiki's laboratory is concerned, wouldn't Senior Shiana be in danger if she really went to his place? The laboratory is completely unprotected against Dr. Funakoshi. In other words, who would have thought that his students would directly attack the laboratory as a kamikaze, right? Professor Fujiki is old, and some of them can no longer teach. If it is not for specific research projects, there are actually several professors of the same type at Tokyo University. They are relatively younger and more willing to teach more students. He subconsciously looked at Mr. Shiana. This man has not spoken until now. He obviously acquiesces to Shiana-Kian's deviant, but his father-in-law is somewhat chauvinistic, so he may not be so easy to speak. That night, Asaba Kazuma was stayed for dinner by Shiana's mother. In fact, because Asaba Kazuma lived alone, the senior sister secretly went to Asaba Kazuma's house for dinner after she went to college. At the dinner table, Mr. Shiana still maintained a serious face. Shiana Kane was a little embarrassed to pick up vegetables for Asaba Kazuma, and while doing so, she looked at her father cautiously. Clip it once and take a look. Clip it again and take another look. Mrs. Shiana couldn't bear to see how her little one was shrinking from the food, so she took it upon herself to pick up the food for Asaba Kazuma. Seeing the unfulfilled look on her mother's face, Shiana Kian pouts. Unhappy. But with him here, Shiana Uman's appetite is better than usual. After finishing the small bowl of rice, she held out the bowl and said, Dad, give me another half bowl of rice. Kinya Kazuma, okay. Mr. Shiana, okay. Shiana Uman, hair fried, bowed, blushing. To die. To die. To die. The tricks the young couple played in private were accidentally exposed. Mr. Shiana narrowed his eyes filled with murderous intent. Kinya Kazuma's outstretched hand froze, but fortunately his mind moved quickly and he immediately said, leave me alone, it would be bad for our dad to do this kind of thing. Shiana Kian lowered her head and did not dare to speak, letting her boyfriend do what he wanted. Mr. Shiana didn't want to say anything anymore and stared at his daughter without speaking. Shiana Kian broke into a cold sweat and said, Dad, I'm going to take care of the heir. Asahi Kazuma was already in trouble. He was a man. How could he not know that the senior sister and her father had guessed the truth, so he simply said, Father-in-law, I will take good care of the senior sister. Mr. Shiana's defense broke. He moved his mouth slightly and spit out one word, get out. In fact, you are faster than their mother and daughter imagined. For such a famous ukiyo artist, what can be more recognized by him than a competent junior, but how to operate specifically, you have to make a choice. Shiana's father-in-law, I'm sorry, I don't pretend anymore, I am the capital. Celebrity. See how my talent defeats the famous people. I am the man who wants to become the king of comics. Free simulation. Asaba Kazuma couldn't even think about it, so he directly chose the option. There is no need to consider this at all. Option may first make Shiana's father give in. After all, being famous and being rich cannot be equated. Even if he used money to smash open the door of Shiana's house, the dissatisfaction deep in his heart would never disappear. Option 3 is a compromise option between the first two options. It has a certain connection with the traditional painting circle and is not short of money, but it is still in the middle and lower reaches of the painting contempt chain. So he can only choose. Shiana's father-in-law, I'm showing off my cards. I'm going to defeat you in the areas you're proud of. With the help of Mr. Ishijiro, you won the gold medal in the youth category of the Tokyo painting competition. At the same time, the plot of The Prince of Tennis has reached a small climax, officially starting the road to breaking out of the circle. A reporter photographed you training with the #1 Japanese men's tennis player in a tennis club. The video instantly became popular on Twitter. A professional tennis player said, Ryo Kawanishi was already very angry during the game, but he still lost in the end. His opponent was even better. I heard that person was a cartoonist, and he drew tennis themes. There is a possibility that the book Prince of Tennis is actually based on reality /. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 56. What is a complete victory? This is called a great victory. This simulation fully verified one of his previous conjectures, that is, all simulations are based on reality. A strange situation occurred in Rina's previous simulation. In the offline where he was the novel editor, he clearly rejected Tamura-senpai's help in the options and chose to go to the underworld to beat up the editor-in-chief, but Tamura-senpai still chose to help him. Because in the eyes of the seniors, it is a matter of course to help the juniors who are in trouble. The simulation options determine the path you, as the protagonist, will take, but cannot affect the choices of others. In other words, in the same way, even if he did not choose to take the path of becoming a capital or becoming the king of comics in the simulation, if he ran towards this path in reality, then he would not. This advantage is lost for any reason. This is a major trend that cannot be changed even in dating simulations. The answer of I want them all is hidden in the seemingly single choice. It's not that you lose everything, but that you undoubtedly win, win, win. As long as you stand up in reality, even the love simulation will have to work in vain. What is this? Is the cyber love version of Industry is King? After making a guess, he then looked at the progress of the simulation. You start arranging personnel to investigate the relationship between Dr. Funakoshi and the gangster who almost stabbed you 3 times. You suspect that there is an inside story about the adjuster that you don't know behind this. It takes time to investigate the news. The private detective has told you that there is relevant news. You have increased the investigation fee and asked him to follow up with all his strength. Graduation is approaching at this time, and this year's cultural festival has started successfully. You and Shianakian have made an appointment to go shopping together on the 3rd day, so on this day, you completed some tasks assigned by teacher Hayakawa and came to the school gate. The scene unfolds. Shianakane finally saw the boyfriend she had longed for, and happily went up and hugged his hand. There were faint screams of some girls nearby. Shianakian raised her head to reveal her beautiful face, and her screams became louder. Listening to the words incomparable and hateful vaguely coming from the surroundings, Shianakane calmly said, "You are very famous among female students now." "Fortunately, I have been keeping my integrity," Jian Yufengjian said calmly, took out an apple candy from behind, carefully tore off the film and handed it to her. "Here." Shianakian took it and took a bite without ceremony, then pointed the gap in his direction and said, "Take a bite, ah." Kinya Kazuma took a small bite and said, "Let's go, it's still a long time." The two of them walked around the campus for a long time and were almost full from eating. Even Asaba Kazuma couldn't finish the smoothie he ordered at the end, so he just took one bite for himself and gave it to Shianakane. "It took us half an hour to finish it." I feel like I have made up for the regret of the school festival. Shianakane stretched his waist. When passing by the exhibition hall, she went in and glanced at the graduation photos of the previous students, pointed at the photos and said, "Who do you think is the prettiest in there?" Asaba Kazuma pointed to one of the corners. "Hidden there is a little Shianayuine." "Humph, I guess you have a good sense. How else could I have deceived you? Let's go." "We didn't do ballroom dancing last year," Asaba Kazuma said, and the two strolled to the playground. At this time, a bonfire was already burning. When the two danced, it seemed that everyone's eyes could not help but turn this way. You can still vaguely hear the sounds of people praising and eating lemons. The two of them ignored this, they only had eyes for each other. After the dance ended, Shianakian shook his head. "I always feel that this ballroom dance is just like this." The two looked at each other and suddenly smiled, both understanding what the other meant. "Let's go to the rooftop." On the rooftop of the university, the dance ended with familiar dance music, and the two people who finished the dance looked at each other. Asaba Kazuma suddenly said, "From now on, let's dance once every year during the cultural festival until we can't dance anymore." She gently leaned her head in his arms and whispered, "Okay, you must remember to come with me." On the third day after the cultural festival, a private detective contacted you and informed you that the gangster had been treated at Genji Medical many years ago. The attending physician was Dr. Funakoshi. You began to suspect that Funakoshi Hayato had never stopped researching on gene modification at all. You asked the private detective to continue investigating the gangster's identity and found that he was connected to another group of criminals. You obtained new information from the private detective. The scene unfolds. Recently, there have been frequent criminals circulating in Tokyo. These criminals have the same characteristics, which are amazing physical fitness and violent killings from time to time. The gang of losers from the Metropolitan Police Department rounded up a group of people some time ago, but there are still some people who slip through the net. The person you were investigating before seemed to have been with them in the past. Sir, for the sake of our cooperation, please be more careful. Tokyo is not safe during this period. You can go out less often at night. In a tea ceremony hall, a private detective took out the video material he accidentally picked up from the Metropolitan Police Department. The three young men in black clothes in the video jumped straight up to the second floor without any relay, grabbed the protective net, and instantly transformed into a youth version of Spider-Man, climbing to the top of the building in 3 strokes, 5 divided by 2. Which made his eyelids twitch slightly. Although he could also achieve this with nerve reflex strengthening, in terms of physical fitness alone, these 3 people were undoubtedly above him. Adjusters who focus on physical enhancement. It's strange that there are so many adjusters and they can all be gathered together. Qian Yufengjian pondered. Doubt arose in his mind. Reminiscent of the almost cyberpunk future world, as soon as the news of adjusters broke out, various countries came up with plans to train future generations to become adjusters in a very short period of time. Asaba Kazuma didn't quite believe that this was a result that could be taken out casually. "I am afraid that for a long time, all countries have been quietly suppressing the news of the existence of adjusters, and will not relax the news until a reasonable solution is obtained." When he got the news and went home, Asaba Kazuma thought about the current information. Unknown. 1. Adjusters appear in small batches. 2. The direction of adjustment genes of this group of people is relatively single, and they all seem to be body-enhancing genes. 3. Genji Medical once abandoned this plan, but Genji headquarters picked it up again and contacted Professor Fujiki to continue research. In the future of love simulation, there are acquired adjusters. 4. The only people who knew that Shianayuine had modified genes were Dr. Funakoshi's team and Genji-related staff at the time. 5. Among the genetic adjustment personnel information stacked on Professor Fujiki's desk, there is a gangster who almost killed Asaba Kazuma, and the gangster had received treatment from Dr. Funakoshi. After combing through this piece of information, Qian Yufengjian's eyebrows jumped wildly. He recalled that when he encountered the gangster in reality, the gangster's nerve reflexes were so fast that he was able to strike first and block his attack, even though he was scheming intentionally or not. If he hadn't used the feint attack from the beginning, he might have been subdued directly by the gangster who reacted. Long weapons versus bare hands, intentional calculations but not intentional, all this can be reflected. Now that I think about it, it's quite outrageous. Doesn't the gangster have a special adjustment gene like the enhancement of nerve reflexes? Asa Kazuma felt a little uneasy. Don't tell me that these gangsters are actually man-made products, right? What's the matter? You still want to stage an absolute abilities project in Tokyo, where adjusters will fight each other to cultivate the strongest adjusters? What kind of accelerator behavior? Oh, this is Japan, that's okay. However, if this group of adjusters is a man-made product, then Hayato Funakoshi's motives are questionable, and the possibility of a consortium being involved behind the scenes cannot be ruled out. Trouble is, with this group of people involved, they can't even directly and secretly report Funakoshi Hayato's crimes against humanity without causing a big fuss. You can't expose these people's plans directly, the consortium's influence in Japan is too great. Fortunately, you have now asked Shiina Yuine to study with another professor who is also doing related research, so things won't be so easy. In the adjuster project, with the knowledge of redemption in the achievement store, you can start quickly as soon as you enter college. Then you want to go to the meeting alone to see what happens. Tuesday is coming soon. Please help me catch up tomorrow. I will prepare recommendations soon. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 57. You successfully admitted to the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Tokyo. You are successful in your career and have earned a lot of wealth. You choose to buy a property near the University of Tokyo so that you can have a home with Shiina-senpai after you finish the experiment. Too late. System prompt, you have unlocked the achievement of the first house, achievement point add 1. You took the initiative to contact Professor Fujiki and showed him your rich reserve of learning knowledge. You impressed him with your strength and active learning behavior, and he began to try to teach you and let you become his assistant. Your life is still going on. When you were watching the news that night, you received the news that a strong typhoon was coming, but the University of Tokyo did not issue a holiday notice due to the strong typhoon. On this day, when you finished handling the tasks assigned by Professor Fujiki and just returned home, you received a call from Shiina-senpai. The scene unfolds. The phone rings. After Asaba Kazut was connected, Shiina Uman's cheerful voice sounded, "Come pick me up, my umbrella is missing. You all know that there is a typhoon today, but why don't you bring an umbrella? Come on, it's already late. There's going to be a typhoon soon, so I won't go back." Qian Yufengjian had a thought in his mind. If there is a typhoon, it would be more dangerous to go home directly. It is a good choice to live nearby. My parents-in-law, I'm sorry. Asaba Kazuma muttered something in his mind, then happily turned off his phone and walked towards the teaching building where Shiina Yuine was. Typhoon days are the best time to sleep. When he walked out of the house again, the howling wind outside made his cheeks hurt, and the roaring thunder was accompanied by the pouring rain. When you arrived at the school laboratory building despite the heavy rain, you finally saw Shiina Uman. She is standing at the door of the teaching building, the strong wind makes her body tremble, and you suddenly feel distressed. The scene unfolds. When she saw Asaba Kazuma, her calm face burst into a joyful smile, and her pretty face was filled with joy. Several boys on the side who deliberately pretended to hide from the rain were attracted to her several times, and when they saw her, they fell. When he entered Qian Yufengjian's arms, he shook his head sadly. "I knew you would definitely come. It's raining heavily. Let's go back quickly." Shiina Qian's beautiful eyes turned slightly, she stood on her tiptoes and said in his ear, "This must be the first time you hold an umbrella with me." Qian Yufengma nodded. In the restless student days, The matching umbrella in the heavy rain was a theme that was difficult to skip. But that doesn't concern the two, who can barely walk to school. Because there was a typhoon today, most students left school early, and there were really few pedestrians on the road. Shianauman suddenly wanted to say, "It's very windy today, Kazuma, have you brought anything out?" Of course Asaba Kazuma knew what she was talking about, the rose-patterned silver eye patch. She was used to being put on his eye patch and experiencing the changes in the natural environment. Shianauman seemed to fall in love with this feeling more and more. "It's raining," Kyanba Kazuma said, but still took out the eye mask from the bag. This was the first time she asked to wear it. Without sight, Shianauman could only rely on him to lead the way when walking. Fortunately, this road was a straight road and there were no risks. When she became interested, Asahi Kazuma played with her. Besides, after putting on the blindfold, Shianauman got closer to him. This feeling of being filled physically and mentally is not bad. But soon, Shianauman stopped and took the initiative to take off the blindfold. "Kazuma." Kinyo Kazuma narrowed his eyes and said nothing. This is the secret code between the two of them. Shianauman's ability to distinguish timbre has become more and more clear now, especially after wearing a blindfold. The ability to further amplify is even more powerful. Even sometimes, she could hear some sounds that Asahi Kazuma couldn't hear clearly at all. If this were in the game world, she would have already unlocked the ability to identify locations by hearing sounds and fight at night. And her intention to stop was clear, she felt threatened. Qian Yufengjian quietly swept around, and a man staggered towards them. He didn't have an umbrella, and the heavy rain got him wet. Qian Yu Kazuma sighed, "I'm afraid I won't be able to go home cleanly today." He had seen this man before. In the Metropolitan Police video picked up by the detective, he was a madman who had committed more than 10 murders. After seeing the two of them, he raised his head, his eyes filled with an indescribable desire. Without saying a word, he pounced directly on the two of them. However, Asahi Kazuma was faster, and the umbrella in his hand hit him hard. The young man paused for a moment, then changed direction and rushed towards him again. He instinctively thought that this guy wanted to attack his senior sister and wanted to stop him, but he never expected that he would rush directly towards him. Nerve reflexes have their limits. He slowed down by half a beat. The man was too fast. Like a wild beast, he directly tore a hole in Asahi Kazuma's coat. After the burning pain came, the umbrella in his hand, it hit the vagus nerve on the roof of his mouth directly. It would be more in line with his wishes not to take action against Hien. There is no mercy when it comes to attacking. Before the staggering adjuster could recover, the umbrella hit him again. The pain made Kinyo Kazuma furious. When he struck, he was stunned and fell to the ground, and then he stepped forward to restrain him. The police soon came and took this person away. The police car sent the two of you downstairs. Shianauman, who was already soaked, went to take a bath first, while you took a bath towel and wiped it off. First dry your hair and then treat the wound. As I was washing, the bathroom door suddenly opened, and the dazed Shianauman poked her head out. Water droplets fell from her long hair, and Shianauman's soft voice said, "Kazuma, help me get a bath towel, the bathroom is too hot, I almost melted." The sound made his heart skip a beat. Since this guy got the key to his house, he has an extra set of toiletries in his house, and the dishes and chopsticks have been replaced by couple sets. Now is the stage of their passionate love, and neither one wants to leave the other. But, perhaps because he went too far in teasing this guy in high school, now, whenever there is an opportunity, Shianauman will tease him in turn. After the bath towel was handed over, it didn't take long for Shianauman to come out wearing a bathrobe. The loose bathrobe could not cover up her large scenery. When Shianauman threw herself into his arms, he could clearly feel his body temperature beginning to rise. He thought it was her teasing him again, but he soon discovered that Shianauman was trembling slightly. Kinya Kazuma rubbed her hair that had not yet been dried and whispered, "What's wrong?" "Kazuma, kiss me." She didn't respond, she just raised her head and made a gesture of letting herself be bullied. Kinya Kazuma couldn't bear it and blocked her on the sofa. Xianayuan seemed to be resisting, her body shook a bit, and she accidentally touched his bandaged wound. He paused, and Xianakian looked at his arm in a panic. "It doesn't hurt that much," Asahi Kazuma said. Xianakian almost cried, "You look like you're in so much pain. Just divert your attention." He lowered his head. This time Xianayuan did not stop him. When the tip of her tongue traced her sharp little fangs, her body trembled, but she carefully launched the test. After Xianakian was already a little confused, she said, "Will it feel better?" Qian Yufengjian was slightly stunned, and said with a smile, "Much better." Xianakian hesitated for a moment and said, "Is that person a lunatic? Only those who turned him into this will know. I feel like he is staring at you, Kazuma, you have to be careful." Xianakian carefully held his neck and said infatuatedly, "If you are injured, I will be very sad, so don't get hurt." Kinya Kazuma lowered his head and smiled, "It's a typhoon day now. If you do this again, I will take action." His voice was a little hoarse, and Xianakian's body trembled. On a typhoon day, no matter how loud you scream, your neighbors won't be able to hear you. A beautiful night has passed, and you continue to let people investigate the news behind the adjuster. On the other hand, your relationship with Xianayuan is getting closer. Tatsuo Fujiki also values your abilities more and more, and the physical examination benefits originally arranged for all graduate students are also open to you, and he doesn't even mind purchasing the physical examination items together with your relatives. Since your parents are not in Tokyo, you simply ask Xianayuan to come for a physical examination. You want to see the results of her physical examination. After the physical examination, Professor Fujiki began to let you participate more in his research, and even informed you of Genji's restarted adjuster project. You looked at Funakoshi Hayato's name on the list of researchers and knew the secrets of Tokyo. I finally opened a corner of my face to you. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 58. Asayu Kazuma's expression gradually changed. Finally it was time to get to the part he wanted to know the most. The scientific research project invested by the Genji Group, whose full name is the Void Genome Gene Research Project, is named this within Genji because the genome that gives people unparalleled talents has a mysterious origin and a mysterious effect, as if it suddenly popped out of the void name. Genji was optimistic about the future of genetic adjustment and began to invest in Professor Fujiki's research. However, due to some internal problems within Genji, the research was temporarily suspended. Recently, the research has been restarted. Professor Fujiki is the leader in charge of one of the research directions, and his deputy at Genji Medical is Dr. Funakoshi. The scene unfolds. In the office, Professor Fujiki asked Asaba Kazuma gently. "How's it going, Seo Kazuma? Are you interested in taking over?" Asaba Kazuma put down the information in his hand and said, "Why not? I really didn't expect that there would be such a magical gene in this world. It's like a genius specially adjusted by God." Professor Fujiki scratched his few hair and said with a smile, "It's quite enviable. Geniuses with such special talents, coexisting with them, is really a blow to personal value." Asaba Kazuma said seriously, "So this shows how valuable your research is, using CRISPR-Cas9 for gene induction to turn the recessive void genome into a dominant one. If it really succeeds, the conflicts between adjusters and ordinary people in the future should be alleviated to a great extent." Professor Fujiki's smile became gentler and he said, "If you can think of something so far back, you have really considered this issue. In fact, previous research on gene induction reagents based on CRISPR-Cas9 was so unstable that your senior brother Hayato has been researching it for several years, but there has been no stable result. And according to our previous research, even if the gene induction reagent of CRISPR-Cas9 is well researched, it can activate the void gene hidden in the human body, but it also hides the hidden danger of gene collapse. Asahikazuma's ears twitched, and his eyes couldn't help but become serious. That's why patients with genius disease suddenly have a fever at a certain moment, right? Fever is just a symptom, because the natural activation of the void genome causes problems with the stability of the gene chain. If you are not careful, it will cause the gene to collapse and die. I really don't know if it is a blessing or a curse. Professor Fujiki said helplessly, "Why, are you worried about your girlfriend Shianakane? In fact, don't worry, she has already passed that period, and now her genes are stable, so there will be no problems as expected." Qian Yufengjian was indifferent. In fact, something unexpected happened. He is really the old general on the stage, covered with flags. If you are really worried about her, why don't you take a look at this? Professor Fujiki handed over another piece of research information. He glanced at it and was shocked. Gene stabilization reagent program developed based on Fanzer protein system. Well, the biggest danger of genius disease is the instability caused by gene induction. The close relative editing system of CRISPR-Cas9 discovered by Professor Zhang Feng and the Fanzer protein system is mainly aimed at eukaryotes. Compared with the traditional CRISPR-Cas9, it may have miraculous effects in adult gene editing and gene stabilization. A senior who is 5 years older than you is currently in short supply. If you go there, it will really be a big help. A vague thought flashed through his mind. Professor Fujiki seems to know a little bit about the main person in charge of the project. Qian Yufengjian was thoughtful. In any case, this is a good research project, whether it is for myself, Rina, or Hien. You readily agreed and went to the gene stabilization reagent team to start related research. You find that Professor Fujiki likes his Parker pen very much and takes it with him almost everywhere in the office on weekdays. The professor will put the pen in his briefcase. Sometimes, Hayato Funakoshi will come over with the research progress of Genji and compare it with Professor Fujiki's group. You start to absorb the research results of both groups without changing your expression during this period. You chatted with Dr. Funakoshi and learned that now his main responsibility is to collect disease data on genius patients for Professor Fujiki. During this period, the relationship between you and Shianakian became closer, and the process related to the Fanzer protein system also progressed smoothly. You seem to be more suitable for related research than you thought. You start escorting Shianakane home every day, or to your own home after the typhoon. She can stay at your home at any time, you just need to inform your home in advance. The physical examination of this year's experimental group came as scheduled. You observed the physical examination personnel and found that there was a Genji medical logo on their toolboxes. You secretly asked the physical examination nurse, and she shyly told you that this physical examination project was led by Professor Fujiki. Promoted. You will be thoughtful after listening. You contacted a private detective to purchase a batch of button locators, modified them into different shapes, and sewed them on the jackets you often wear. You tell the detective your regular course of action, and say that if there are any temporary changes, you will send him a message in advance. If no message is sent, or contact is suddenly lost, he needs to activate an emergency plan. When I went to the laboratory that day, I found that there was no ink when recording data, so I went to Professor Fujiki to borrow a pen. After using it, you thoughtfully unscrewed the pen cap and helped the professor refill the ink. He returned it with a smile. The professor saw you refilling the ink for him, and his expression on your face became a little warmer. You participated in the Hakuin High School Cultural Festival and danced together on the rooftop again. In my junior year of college, Shianakane went to the animation studio where you supervised your work in your spare time. When you came back, your expression was not very good, because the girl who took over your supervisory position in the animation studio and called you master, She could see that there was more than just longing in her eyes. The initial research results of gene stabilization reagents are unexpectedly fast, and you have early results soon. It took you a long time to comfort her and make an agreement to go shopping with her on Christmas Day. The scene unfolds. Location, Dongda Laboratory. Shiana Uman, wearing a white coat, looked more beautiful than usual. There were still 2 days before Christmas Eve. Asahi Kazuma, who had just completed the experiment, ran to the laboratory where Shiana Uman was. Today several laboratory members happened to undergo routine physical examinations. After the inspectors left, Asahi Kazuma finally got around to talking to Shiana Kane. You haven't been paying attention to anyone lately. Shiana Kane sat on the sofa, carefully tore open the pudding, and then handed it to Asahi Kazuma. Qian Yufengjian's face was a little pale, so he took it and ate it in just a few bites. Shiana Kane took the garbage and saw that there were still a lot of residue inside. He casually stretched out his little tongue and licked it clean before throwing it into the trash can. Professor Fujiki's research has entered a critical moment. There really isn't much time. I still have to wrap up the work before going out for Christmas. Shiana Yuan looked at Asahi Kazuma and could vaguely sense that what he told was not the truth, or that he did not tell the truth completely. Perhaps Asahi Kazuma didn't even realize that as the countdown to Shiana Yuan's murder was getting closer, the fear and anxiety in his voice were accumulating. Shiana Kane didn't know the reason, so she could only stay with him silently, hoping to use companionship to ease his mood. By the way, I still recommend that you don't meet Dr. Funakoshi unless necessary. That person is very dangerous. I know, to be honest, I personally feel that Dr. Funakoshi is a very nice person. Why do you have such a big opinion against him? Hard to say. Shiana Kane shook his head and said, on the contrary, it's Professor Fujiki. I always feel that this person is quite scary, but I can't tell what's wrong with him. Asahi Kazuma paused for a moment, thoughtfully. You don't like Professor Fujiki very much. Shiana Kane nodded. He looks at you a little strange. Ah. Just as he was about to say something, the lights in the office suddenly went out. A creepy feeling filled his whole body, and he subconsciously stood in front of Shiana Kane. In the dim room, something waved over, and he stretched out his hand to stop it. A numb feeling spread all over his body, and he fell to the ground instantly. Following closely behind was Shiana Yuan. The paralyzed Asahi Kazuma tried to raise his head to look at the figure in the darkness. The moonlight poured down, revealing Professor Fujiki's old face with sparse hair. Times haven't changed. Even if you have the body-enhancing gene, you won't be able to withstand the electric shock baton for long. Kinyu felt chills all over his body in the wind. Wanting to say something, Tatsuo Fujiki had already picked up a towel and covered his and Shiana Kane's mouths and noses. The smell was ether. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 59. You lost consciousness, and when you woke up again, you were already in a dark basement. Suddenly, the door opened. The scene unfolds. Kinyu Kazuma was lying on the ground sore and limp, feeling like he couldn't use any strength. He first checked the position of Shiana Kane and found that she was tightly tied up and sleeping in the corner. He breathed a sigh of relief and checked the button locator again. Where is my locator? Are you awake? An old voice sounded, and Professor Fujiki walked in. You don't think I didn't notice your button locator, do you? The metal detector is really useful. Kinyu Kazuma's brows jumped. How could he not understand that this bastard had been paying attention to his situation? Professor Fujiki, you are committing a crime. Tatsuo Fujiki calmly walked up to Asahi Kazuma and said, No, I am making full use of your residual value. Seeing Kinyu Kazuma's wary eyes, he smiled warmly. Among the more than 200 cases that Genji has collected across Japan, there are not many people who can stably awaken. It can be said that there are very few people who can have two sets of void genomes taking effect at the same time without causing significant consequences, and Xianayuan is one of them. The Xiana family is not a little gangster with no foundation. He doesn't want to cause trouble. He has been investigating secretly before. Now that he has succeeded, he finally reveals his true identity. Asaba Kazuma glanced at the wall clock in the basement, thoughtfully, and asked, "The criminals recently targeted by the Metropolitan Police Department are probably your work, Professor Fujiki." Professor Fujiki laughed out loud. "Ah, you are talking about those test subjects. It's a shame you can relate them to me. They are really lucky people who have the honor to participate in my research. They were originally a group of gangsters, the worms of society, and trash who could not stand on the stage. They were lucky enough to survive gene editing and possess the void gene. This was their blessing." Asaba Kazuma looked at Professor Fujiki subtly, and said abruptly, "Aren't you worried that Genji will cause trouble for you? If your guess is correct, the Genji group is actually unaware of many of Professor Fujiki's actions. For this kind of consortium, they have many opportunities to shut up these experimental subjects and provide better aftermath. Releasing these experimental subjects is purely to cause unnecessary trouble for the Genji group. The Japanese Metropolitan Police is a rabid dog that eats people without spitting out bones." As expected, Professor Fujiki's hypocritical smile faded and he said calmly, "He is indeed my best student. However, Genji Medical forcibly interrupted my project that year. Since then, if I want to continue related research, I can only hide everything in this dark and damp basement." Finally, the internal fighting within their group came to an end for the time being, and they finally restarted the project, and then they found an unreasonable master. Why did they pursue so much? It would be great if they were confused and waited until I succeeded in researching it for them, and then everyone would gain fame and fortune together. Kinya Kazuma sighed, "You are joking. If you really had this intention, we wouldn't be here anymore." Professor Fujiki said with some melancholy, "What can I do, my good student? I am already old and there is not much time left for me. If I were 5 years younger, I would be willing to wait for the results slowly. If I were 10 years younger, I would regard you as my successor and teach you everything I have. But, Xiaofengjian, teacher, I am already 77 years old and I have no time. Research on the void genome is the only way I can find to extend my life. Anyone who dares to stop me is my enemy, and you are no exception." Asayu Kazuma's eyes gradually turned cold. "The physical examination is indeed related to you. You are indeed my favorite disciple," Professor Fujiki said softly. "There are people within the Genji group who have never given up collecting the blood of genius disease patients, and I borrowed their channels for a little bit." He made a gesture that was enough to make the stick man angry. "Originally, I just wanted to know a little bit about Shianakian. How could I have imagined that 3 dominant void genes would be found in you? You are a real treasure. It's a pity." Asaba Kazuma looked at him faintly and said, "Then what is the reason why you want to kill Shiana-senpai? What is the problem with her body?" This time it was Professor Fujiki's turn to be stunned. After a moment, he burst into tears from laughing. "You are an infatuated boy. I really like you more and more. At this time, you are still worried about her. I heard that you seem to send her home every day. Have you guessed that there is something wrong with me and want to protect her? But I always feel like you've made a mistake." Professor Fujiki stretched out his hand, patted the shoulder of him who was unable to move on the floor and said, "Shianayuin is just by the way. You are the one who has the physical problem, Kakazuma, you are going to die." Qianyu was silent for a while, and his mind went blank. In a daze, he seemed to understand something. He guessed that these studies were related to the Genji group, guessed that Funakoshi Hayato was involved, and guessed that Professor Fujiki had bad intentions, but he guessed wrongly about Professor Fujiki's target. It's not Shianayuin, it's himself. Impossible, I didn't tell anyone in the last simulation that I had 3 adjustment genes. He reacted instantly the next second. It was the 2 simulated physical examinations organized by Professor Fujiki. The 2 physical examinations in the simulation initially focused on Shianakane, but after the first physical examination, he was exposed to Professor Fujiki's sight. In the corner, there was a crazy twisting sound. Shianakane woke up at some point, but was speechless because her mouth was sealed with tape. Do you know the difference between your group of people who have passed the risk and the group of people whose genes have not been activated yet? You should know better about the research you have done recently on gene stabilizing reagents. The stabilizing reagents to prevent gene collapse are actually artificially injected into the bodies of eugenetic awakeners with substances that inhibit further activation of genes, thus suppressing the possibility of gene collapse. Professor Fujiki put down the cowhide bag in his hand. Asahi Kazuma quietly glanced at the workbench. A Parker pen was placed on the table. Professor Fujiki continued. The risk of the gene induction reagent is too high. It may not be possible to break through for a long time. If it is injected directly, even if you survive by chance, you will be like those gangsters. Your human sanity will completely disappear and you will become a madman. Although gene stabilizing reagents have now found a way, it will take a long time to perfect them. Genji is about to target me, I don't have time, I need a natural stabilizer. My good student, you are going to die anyway, let me extract the stabilizer from your blood in exchange for my glorious evolution. Use mine. Shianakian didn't know when he pushed away the bandage on his mouth and begged, please, use mine, if I have that thing in my blood. You want to use your own life to delay him. It's so touching, Xiao Fengjian, whose life do you think you should use? She can't do it. Let me do it. You don't just want to have a void genome. Professor Fujiki picked up Asahi Kazuma and placed him on the operating table and fixed him. You are right. A blood pump was connected to his veins, and the other was connected to a dialysis machine that seemed to have been modified in some way. In the dim room, only the restlessness of Shianakane's struggle was left. Don't worry, my good student. As your teacher, the last thing I can do is send your little girlfriend to accompany you on the road and become a pair of desperate mandarin ducks. Professor Fujiki sighed for a while and looked at the plasma-containing stabilizer components that was slowly extracted from the dialysis machine. He first injected himself with the gene induction reagent, then took out the first tube of plasma and slowly pushed it into his blood vessel. But what he didn't notice was that there was a subtle smile on Asahi Kazuma's face. It didn't take long for Professor Fujiki to show a happy expression on his face. It's simply the evolution of life. I seem to have returned to my youth. He looked at Asahi Kazuma with his beast-like eyes. Then he saw Asahi Kazuma smiling. What are you laughing at? We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 60. What are you laughing at? Asahi Kazuma sneered, if you only need my blood as the raw material, you can master the power of adjusting genes, then you won't have to study it for so many years. Mr. Fujiki, should I say that you were too stupid, or that you were desperate and deliberately ignored this problem? Professor Fujiki's eyes darkened, you are almost dead and talking so much nonsense. Suddenly, an NHK toll collector appeared on the monitor in the basement. Shianakane's eyes lit up in the corner. Tatsuo Fujiki frowned and closed the basement door when he went up. Shianayuin tried to call for help, but until Professor Fujiki went out and dismissed the NHK toll collector, the person didn't seem to hear their call for help. Her eyes dimmed and she stopped shouting. Kinya Kazuma watched all this quietly, looked at the time, smiled and said in a weak voice. Don't cry, your blood has already been taken. If you cry again, I will feel bad. But you are already, you are like this, and you still comfort me. Shianakane cried very sadly. The worry and fear after waking up, the thought of homesickness, and the sadness of knowing that her boyfriend had a physical problem were intertwined, and she unconsciously wanted to vent it out. It was because she was afraid that Professor Fujiki would do something to him again. Then let's do a magic trick, Qian Yufengjian said softly. I order you to close your eyes now, don't talk, let alone cry anymore. When I let you open your eyes, everything will be fine. I do not believe. I have never lied to you, you know that. Kinya Kazuma's voice began to sound a little weak, so, close your eyes and listen to the sound. Shianakian bit her lower lip until it bled. She closed her eyes in pain. Soon, the world became peaceful. All the sounds became so obvious. Asahi Kazuma's voice was as soft as a feather. When Fujiki walked into the basement again, he looked at Asahi Kazuma as if he was looking at a dead person. Okay, now it's time to send you on your way. Professor Fujiki walked towards him. Beside him, Shianakane's body was trembling and he could hardly help but open his eyes. However, the doorbell rang again. Professor Fujiki looked at the monitor with a cold gaze. It's NHK's toll collector again. He cursed and suppressed his anger before going up again. Asaba Kazuma quietly looked at the monitor, where Fujiki was arguing fiercely with the toll collector. He tried to get up and untied his shoelaces with his fingers, tied a loop on each of his left and right feet, and put it on one of the feet. Then he used his feet as the point of force and tried to step on both feet. The shoelaces rubbed wildly and were cut off directly. Drawstring. At the same time, the toll collector got closer and closer, and suddenly he got angry. An electric baton hit him directly in the face. Fujiki was shocked for 2 seconds continuously. His body seemed to swell a little more, and he slapped away the electric baton with his backhand, turned around and ran towards the house. The door to the basement was blasted open, and Fujiki staggered towards the nearest Shianakane. Shianakane still closed her eyes tightly, but she could hear a malicious voice approaching her quickly. It was the wail of a dying beast, and the heavy roar was getting closer and closer. She seemed to hear the light footsteps of the god of death, and a huge force pulled her body, almost to the point of flying into the air. Then, a sound broke through the air. It sounded like something sharp cutting through the air. Asaba Kazuma grabbed an open pen and stabbed Fujiki in the eye like a confrontation, scaring him so much that he let go and stopped him from retreating. With just half a step back, he kicked Fujiki so hard that he fell to the ground, and then kicked him with all his strength on his vagus nerve. The danger echoing in the air gradually disappeared, and she fell into a warm embrace. Okay, open your eyes, we are safe. She opened her eyes and saw a pen dripping with blood in his hand. Shianakian whispered, I thought I was going to die. Then do you want to give me a reward? Before she finished speaking, the girl raised her head and gave her a long and affectionate kiss, then thank you for the hospitality. The police officers who rushed in looked at you dumbfounded. His slap just now directly broke his colleague's bones, but now this man is motionless. After the accompanying doctor retransfused you with blood, the weakened Shianayuin hugged you tightly. After finishing the transcript, they were both taken home in a police car. After closing the door, she who had been holding back in front of outsiders finally lost control and buried herself in your arms. Shianayuman is beautiful, and even more so when she cries. Her nose was twitching, and her long eyelashes were covered with tears that could not be wiped away. She hugged Asahi Kazuma tightly to prevent him from seeing the tears streaking her fair cheeks. Why didn't you tell me? If you doubt him, don't get close to him, Shianakian choked and said, I thought I was going to lose you just now. Qian Yufengma gently rubbed her soft long hair and hummed, old thief Fujiki has been doing this for more than a day or two. It is impossible for your uncle and aunt to ask someone to protect you every day. Otherwise, it would have to be me. Go and watch. Shianakane didn't speak. She stayed in his arms until she had finished crying, then raised her head, with confusion in her red eyes. How did you let others find us? Qian Yufengjian said calmly, I left 3 sets of plans for myself. Feeling that his body was gradually regaining strength, and the numbness and previous turbidity from ischemia were fading away, he stood up and said. Plan 1. If you want to transport you and me without being noticed, you need at least a car. I asked the private detective to leave locators on his 2 cars, but as expected, this guy's car and residence are probably all have signal jammers. Shianakian nodded and continued. Plan 2, button locators on your and my coats. You know this. Once something happens to you and me, the private detective will directly lock your and my location through the locator. But I make a blind guess that this old bidden has not been discovered for so many years, and he may have mastered some counter-reconnaissance capabilities. So the button locator was my way of fooling him. If he discovers it, use it as a hidden plan to make him relax his vigilance. Shiana Kane's eyes widened and flickered, as if she didn't expect that he was so scheming. Chien Kazuma saw how cute she was and directly pinned her to the sofa with her backhand, and their breaths blended together. Shiana Yuan did not resist, or it was a waste of words. She nuzzled Kazuma like a kitten until his voice became hoarse before continuing. Plan 3. Old Biden never leaves his Parker pen. When I vaguely guessed it was him, I took precautions and stuffed the smallest button locator into his pen. Old Biden's daily schedule is relatively fixed. If something suddenly happens to you or me, and the private detective activates plan number 1 but fails to find us, he will check Fujiki's location through plan number 3. Even if there is a signal jammer, as long as we can determine the final location where the signal appears and the range where contact is lost again, we can at least lock in our approximate location, and then. Then you called the police, right? You're so bad, Shianakian bit him on the upper body. Somehow, she remembered the sister who helped Chien Kazuma handle the work in the construction, so she said again. You still set your heart on fire. As she spoke, her tears fell again. What should you do with your body? He said you won't survive. She was extremely worried, but Jian Yufengjian spread his hands and said, I have my own way. He didn't lie to her, he just didn't do it this time. I don't believe it, she whispered, you always report good things but not bad things in this kind of thing. It's like investigating Fujiki yourself. Anyway, you have to learn to take good care of yourself. After all, do you think everyone is like me, just to scare you? Shianakian nodded, suddenly tugged on his clothes, and said charmingly, then let me ask you a question. You must promise not to lie to me. Asahi Kazuma smiled, didn't he always say no at first? Now that I see her taking such initiative, I feel a little uncomfortable, but she is still very cute. He said, just ask. Shianakian opened her mouth to say something, but ended up blushing, feeling like her head was about to smoke, but she remembered something again, her eyes became firmer, and she pointed at herself and said. Kazima, do you want a wife or not? Kinyu Fengjian was silent, and finally shook his head and said, forget it, I don't have much time left. Asaba Kazuma, you are such a liar, Shianakane said dully. Sadness spread unconsciously. Jian Yufengjian reached out to wipe away her tears, but she hesitated but did not dodge. She spent less time crying in the past few years than she does today. She stared blankly at Asahi Kazuma, and he felt her skin that could be broken by blowing with his fingertips. Finally, he smiled and said. It's time to go to sleep. Time is running out. It took you a long time to get her to sleep. Lying in bed, you can't fall asleep for a long time. Listening to her even breathing, you quietly turned your head and looked at her eyes, which still had faint tears hanging on them, feeling a little sad. He gently kissed away the traces and whispered, forgive me, senior sister, let's do it next time. When she asked him if he wanted a wife, he almost nodded in agreement. But in the end, his rationality made him choose to save his happy and tender time for the simulation of happy end. In this simulation, he was already too late. Just as he turned around, suddenly, the girl stretched out her hand from behind. "There are really many things I want to tell you. I really want to live with you. Thank you for letting me escape from the birdcage, and thank you for always protecting me." She slowly stood up and climbed to the front of Kazuma. "After dawn, let's go register. You have asked me to obey so many times, so just promise me this time." Under the moonlight, the girl's face could not be seen clearly, and only a drop of tear could be seen falling on his face. "Let's get married." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 61. It was Christmas Day and it was snowing in the sky. The scene unfolds. The snow at Christmas is beautiful. The colorful holiday lights reflect the fluttering snowflakes, which is really beautiful. Shianakane ran forward a few steps happily, turned her head, and the light shone on her fair to somewhat transparent face, giving her an indescribable sense of beauty. "I'll arrange today's itinerary, okay?" Kazuma ruffled her hair, and she meowed like a kitten. He laughed dumbly and said, "Okay, I will follow your orders this time." "Good." Shianakian said happily, "Then let's go to the pedestrian street together. You haven't even gone shopping with me." "Good." On the pedestrian street of Roppongi, the scene of the two people walking happily attracted the attention of many people. When they came out of the clothing store, he already had a clothing bag in his hand. Go. Next stop is Akihabara. Don't tell me that you want to go to the tiger's den again, Qian Yufengjian teased. Shianakane snorted and said, "When you were holding the tiger's den notebook and saying weird things in my ear, I didn't refuse." Yes, let's go." But in the end, she didn't even go to Torinobu main store. Instead, she took him to a maid cafe. After letting him sit down, she ordered food and said she wanted to go to the bathroom. Qian Yufengjian was a little helpless. He actually doesn't like the maid style, but he didn't expect Shianakane to seem to like this style. It took a long time before Shianakane came back, and he looked a little confused. Nothing will happen to this guy, right? Just as he was thinking this, a familiar voice sounded. "Master, the delicious magic omelette rice you ordered." Asa Kazuma's expression froze. Watching Shianakane, who was wearing a maid uniform, put the omelette rice on his table, then came close to his ear and whispered. "Tell you the delicious charm quietly, Master Kazuma, this is made by your exclusive maid." Asaba Kazuma didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at Shianakane, who scooped up the omelette rice and handed it to his mouth, but still opened his mouth. "It's quite delicious." After leaving the cafe, all he could think about was her playfully calling her master in his ear. "Humph, how about it? My delicious charm is so powerful." "Ah, yes, remember to make yourself a dinner next time. Let's go and watch a movie." Shianakian's ears turned red and she changed the topic. She deliberately chose a private theater, played a horror movie, and then fully enjoyed the warm feeling of holding Asahi Kazuma and screaming. Then there was walking in the park, sitting on a bench, playing music and sharing the same pair of headphones with him. Leaning on his shoulder, Shianakian said softly, "There are so many things I want to do with you. Time flies so fast." Qian Yufengjian's face was a little pale, and he nodded calmly and said, "Yes, time flies by so fast." He raised his head and saw that the snow was getting heavier. "By the way, wait for me," Shianakian said with a smile, "there is another most important thing today." "Good." Qian Kazuma watched her sneaking into a clothing store and laughed dumbly. He opened his handbag and changed out of his coat. The shirt inside was clean and translucent. He put the suit jacket on his body, tied up the shirt and tied it with a Windsor knot. Then he saw Shiina-uman wearing a wedding dress, trotting towards got him. Kazima. Shiina-kian threw herself into his arms and said in a low voice, "That's it, let's go get the certificate together." Kinyu Kazuma hugged her gently and remained silent for a moment. Good. The girl burst into laughter. She had already brought their driver's licenses. At the marriage registration office, they finally completed the official registration before the staff got off work. From today on, I am Mrs. Kinyu. She whirled around in a circle, her wedding dress fluttering. Chienyu Kazuma looked at her bright smile, and the previous gloom on her face had been swept away. "It's almost like a child," he laughed and shook his head. Shiina-kian pouted, "Why, don't you like it?" Asayu Kazuma shook his head, "I like it, you're so cute. Originally, I was going to let you go, but now it's okay. Register for marriage, and you'll get on my broken ship." She took a few steps forward with her hands behind her back and said, "I like it, don't you?" Asahi Kazuma felt his heart aching, both psychologically and physically. In fact, from the moment his blood was drawn, he could clearly feel that something was slowly draining away from his body. Shiina-kian turned around, hugged him tightly and said, "Let's go to the Ferris wheel." Asayu Kazuma walked slowly and nodded seriously. As the Ferris wheel began to rotate, their world became extremely peaceful at this moment. Looking at the snowflakes falling leisurely outside the Ferris wheel, her eyes were a little vacant. "It's so beautiful." She gently blew the snowflakes off his shoulders, leaned next to him, and took out her notebook. Asahi Kazuma looked over curiously. He saw 100 things written densely on it. 1. Meet Junior Asahi and try to smell his scent. 2. Let's hide in the corner and whisper together. 3. Take him to meet his parents. 4. Lie to him to take me to see my uncle and aunt. Lines of neat handwriting, some of which have been crossed out. Taking a closer look, he knew that those were the things he and she had experienced. He watched her take out a pen. 29. Go shopping with him and choose a suit for him, cross it out. 44. Take him to the maid cafe, call him master, and feed him omelette rice, cross it out. 77. Run to him in a wedding dress, cross it out. 91. Get the certificate and become Mrs. Kinyu, cross it out. After doing all this, she raised her head and looked at Chienyu Kazuma. "Isn't it very childish?" He shook his head, "Nothing. The snow has become heavier," she whispered. "I really want to turn into snow, so that it can fall on you without having to say goodbye." "The snow is too cold." Kinyu Fengjian shook his head, "You are afraid of the cold. It doesn't matter, as long as it stays in your palm until it melts." Asahi Kazuma wanted to get up, but after a while, he sat down a little weakly and said, "It's a pity that the research on the gene-stabilizing reagent I have is only at the beginning. If this research can be completed, maybe I can accompany you more." "Accompany Mrs. Kinyu?" Shiina-kian's words Mrs. Asaba made her eyes red, and she hugged him tightly without saying a word. He whispered, "In fact, separation is not that terrible. After 650,000 hours, when we oxidize into wind, we can become two adjacent bubbles on the same glass of beer, and we can become two cuddling stars under the same street lamp. Dust. The atoms of the universe will not be annihilated, and we will eventually be able to be together." After that, he never spoke again. A silence filled the space. After a long time, a small sob sounded, and then it turned into uncontrollable crying. She finally lost him. System prompt: you have unlocked the achievement Love Affair Asaba Kazuma /U0026 amp, Shiina-uman, achievement points add 5. Your encounter with Shiina-uman started from an accident and ended on a snowy Christmas Eve. You are dead. In the simulation space, Asayu Kazuma watched the scene quietly and said softly, "Be happy, Mrs. Asayu." Then he clutched his body in pain. Along with the influx of memories, the pain of death also came in. "Mrs. Kinyu, we will meet again in the next simulation." He waited quietly for the simulation to end. Why didn't the simulation end? We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 62. Why didn't the simulation end? Qian Yufengjian was a little confused. When he died in the game before, didn't he just exit the simulation? But why this time, the simulation is still continuing? Your parents, who are far away in Kumamoto Prefecture, came to Tokyo to attend your funeral wearing mourning clothes. She received your parents as your wife. Shiana's family was very worried about her mental state and comforted her for a long time. Suddenly one day, Shiana Kane told her family that she wanted to continue her unfinished research. Mr. Shiana agreed. If high-intensity work can dilute the pain in her heart, this may also be a good thing. Because of the previous accident, she was worried that someone would use violence to interfere with her research, so Shiana Kane entrusted her father to prepare a lady's pistol for her. With the full support of her family, she took over the gene-stabilizing reagent project that you led during your lifetime and continued research. The scene unfolds. This time, Asaba Kazuma felt like he had become a ghost. Follow Shiana Yuine quietly. He watched her study without sleep or food. Watch her struggle to keep the project moving forward. Watch her reject one admirer after another and immerse herself in research. Sometimes, some people who didn't know she was married would still call her Shiana Kane, but she would always emphasize that she should call her Asaba Kane. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. She is still so beautiful, and time seems to have left no trace on her body. Shiana Kane didn't know that Christmas Eve would be the last time she saw herself. However, it was not the last time Asahi Kazuma saw her. She still lives in the temporary residence bought by Asaba Kazuma, but she spends more and more time in the research room. In the 3rd year after graduation, she relied on her accumulation far beyond ordinary people, and with the number of T-category academic papers and Lancet papers that were almost regarded as a brush, she became a star in the field of gene therapy that has attracted worldwide attention. Another year passed, and the gene therapy she led for several localized cell degenerative diseases became the only hope for many suffering patients. When the first patient was cured under her hands, he finally saw her smile again. I don't know when, people would respectfully call her Dr. Kinyu. Every time she heard a patient say this, her smile would be brighter. Time flies, another 10 years have passed, and Shiana Kane has become the brightest pearl in the field of genetic diseases. Another year has passed, and news of the genius disease caused by the void gene has spread all over the world, and the gene stabilizing reagent project led by Shiana Kane has officially been completed. Qian Kazuma watched her holding the completed reagent and hiding in the corner of the laboratory for a long time without saying anything, feeling very heartbroken. Asahi Kazuma, who turned into a ghost, stood beside her and sighed like this for the first time. Let it go. It's time for you to forget all this and start a new life. But she couldn't hear it. The day after the research results were verified, Shiana Kane announced the technical details of the gene-stabilizing reagent to the world. Such a move made the world into an uproar. An unprecedented storm of public opinion swept across the country. Public opinion about genius disease has caused an uproar around the world since it was disclosed. Gene-edited newborn experiments announced by various countries have caused an unprecedented storm of public opinion. 5.5% survival probability, and a higher natural awakening survival rate than those born with genius disease, so that every genius who survives successfully is filled with blood. It was not until the emergence of gene-stabilizing agents that the survival rate increased to more than 15%. Even if the treatment is timely, even if the gene awakening fails, death will become paralyzed in bed. At this point, Compared with controllable genetic diseases, they are no longer genetic diseases, but the cradle of genius. Although it is still extremely cruel, the era of adjusters is coming. In October of this year, Hakuin High School invited Shiana Kane as a well-known alumnus to visit the school at the cultural festival. The scene unfolds. Qian Yufengjian was stunned when he heard the news. He knew that she had not been back to Hakuin High School for many years. He thought that Shiana Kane would still refuse this time, but Shiana Kane said to the other end of the phone, "Okay, let me make some preparations in advance." He nodded, "You should move on." But for some reason, while he was happy, he was also a little melancholy. This year's cultural festival was very grand. The principal personally led the team and took Shiana Kane back to Hakuin High School, which had undergone a lot of changes. While passing by the exhibition hall, the principal took her to the place where her graduation photos were displayed. She quietly looked at herself, who was still young and beautiful at that time, chatting with her entourage, and she seemed to feel much more relaxed. Only Asahi Kazuma quietly looked at the photo of his class next to him and said with emotion, "That's fine, I won't be upset if I don't look at it." Until she left, she never took a look at the photos of her class. There are quite a few alumni returning to school this year. She said goodbye to the alumni she knew one by one. Chienyu Kazuma had an impression of those alumni, and many people knew about her and him. When someone talked about him, Asahi Kazuma couldn't help but be curious and floated over to see what the senior would say. "It's been a long time," she said sadly. "Then there is no more." Qian Yufengjian was relieved, but felt a little bitter. As time went by, the bonfire party ended, and the dance music remained. She sat there quietly until it was over, then got up and prepared to leave. Suddenly, she stopped and turned back to look in the direction of the rooftop. That's where they danced together. She smiled, turned around and walked into the night. Qin Yufengjian felt a little uncomfortable, but he was also happy for her. "The terms have been drawn up, just bring them to me to sign," Shiana Kane said to her female assistant in the vehicle. The assistant handed over a contract, which was a distribution list of all the assets owned by Shiana Kane. Before Asahi Kazuma could see it clearly, she signed it and handed it to her assistant to seal it. "Let's drive." There are fewer and fewer vehicles on the road. Asahi Kazuma was a little curious about where she was going. Until he saw a cemetery. The car stopped. Shiana Kane picked up a satchel, took out a bouquet of flowers from the back of the car, and walked towards the depths of the cemetery. Kinyu Kazuma guessed something. Finally, Shiana Kane stopped in front of a tombstone. The monument is engraved with the large characters Qianyu family. She placed flowers on the grave. She opened her handbag and took out a stack of pamphlets and cards. His personal number card, her personal number card. His driver's license, her driver's license. His health insurance card, her health insurance card. His real estate title certificate, her real estate title certificate. Transcript of the Asaba family's household registration. Certificate of acceptance of marriage between the two persons. Certificate of his notarized cremation. She threw them all into the brazier. She took out her phone and chuckled. Asahi Kazuma, who was standing next to her, was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, the music of Mozart's Minuet in D major sounded. He was the one who released it before. Only then did he notice that the clothes Shiana Kane was wearing seemed to be the little white dress from the school festival that year. She bent slightly. In the complete silence, dance music sounded quietly, as if he was accompanying her, and the woman was dancing alone in the empty cemetery. Qianyu Kazuma subconsciously took a step forward. A cemetery under the moonlight. The dead soul and the girl. The boundary between life and death seems to be blurred at this moment. Neither her nor his hands touched each other, they just danced to the music. The fire in the brazier burned out, and the dance ended here. She leaned back subconsciously, and Asahikazuma stretched out his hand to wrap around her waist, just like he did when dancing in the past. But he couldn't touch him. Fortunately, she reacted and stumbled back a few steps, but did not fall to the ground after all. She let out a long sigh. Under the night, she seemed tired and leaned quietly against the tombstone. She checked her watch. The cemetery was closing. It's time to go home. She gently touched the 3 words Kinyu family, and all the emotions in her eyes calmed down. It was as if I could finally shake off a heavy burden. It's good to let it go. Kinyu Kazuma squatted in front of her. Seeing her clear eyesight, he knew she couldn't hear, but said with relief, Heian, be happy. Then, Shianauman put her hand into her satchel. The lady's pistol, which had been maintained and looked like new, was taken out of the bag. The dream he had cherished for the 13th year after he left, just like the summer showers falling on the smooth road, passed away quietly without leaving a trace. This is her farewell. There is no ancient pavilion road, no advice to you to drink another glass of wine. The assistant's call happened to come, Dr. Kinyu, the cemetery is closing. There was a cocking sound and she put the pistol to her temple. Shianakian said softly, you called me wrong, it's Mrs. Asaba. She hung up the phone and hugged his tombstone sideways. In this night, which is the same as usual, crows are flapping their wings. Some people continue to move forward, while others choose to stay in yesterday. Then, boom! Gunshots were fired. The moonlight gurgled in the cemetery, reflecting the tombstones of Qianyu's family. In her dream, she showed a peaceful and happy sleeping face.